It's the Brad and John Show.
This is the C block, Charlie block, which means we start right around 7:40. Today's date is May 8th, 2025. I'm Brad. That's John Combest. Good morning to you again, John.
Good morning to you, Brad.
John, both being North County boys, and I think you have told me on a couple different occasions on the street you lived on, you were the only non-Catholic family on your block. Was that correct?
I sure was, carrying the Protestant flag.
I had the hippie mom who, when today still people ask me, what religion are you? I go, I don't know. And they go like, how can you not know? My mom, the hippie before hippies were hippies, took us to all sorts of different churches because she wanted to expose
Including a drive-through.
Yeah, we used to go
a drive-in, I'm sorry, not a drive-through.
We used to go to Easter morning service at the North Drive-In. Honest to God, I've told that story before, and people go, there's no way you went to Easter morning service at a drive-in theater. Yes, did it for several years. Okay. Having said that, what do you think of the thing with the choosing of the new pope? Is this like, there's a picture that I saw this morning of all the cardinals. I guess this is in the Sistine Chapel. And did you hear the crazy thing about how all the cardinals have had to give up their cellular phones? And the Vatican Police Department has deployed electronic jamming of the cellular service in the Vatican.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I like that.
Yes.
Has anyone from the environmentalist movement blocked the smoke coming from the chimney?
Well, there's a third
That's
color.
where they should start, actually.
There's a third color. See, that's funny. You should bring it up. There's a third color smoke. Yesterday, the black smoke came up, which means there's no decision yet. People are either looking for the white smoke or the orange smoke, one of the two. So
that's a Trump joke from 2 days ago. I love it.
I'm sorry, I reused that one. Is this over the top or what?
I don't know, Brad, because I'm not a Catholic. And so I see the headlines about this and I don't click on them because I don't care enough to follow it. But I see folks in my social media timeline talking about it. And just because I don't understand it doesn't mean that it's not important to a whole lot of people. It would seem as though it's a little bit performative. But I'd also say if you're running the Catholic Church and you're under the age of, let's say, 60, you probably appreciate the value of symbolism and being performative and having things on social media, right? And I think of the fact, Brad, we'll reference him for the second time in 2 days, our friend John Lamping, former state senator now out in Augusta, who is a devout Catholic, and he posts a lot on social media about the Catholic Church. So if you're John Lamping, you're following this very closely because you have a close connection to the church. So again, just because I don't understand it doesn't mean that it's not important to a lot of people.
Well, I know we still praise a lot over the Cardinals because they haven't done as well as when he was there. But that's
his evil twin brother, Mark.
Evil twin brother. I don't know. I just think it's like, and see, my thing comes back to, and remember, I am a pastor. I have married people. You
got an online pastoral degree, right?
I have my own.
So you're not a real pastor, but you got an online.
I am a real
right?
pastor. I have my own church, the GodSquad.cloud church. Okay, I still have a problem with this, where the Pope thing to me violates one of the 10 Commandments.
Thou shalt have no other idols, and we've talked about it before, Brad. I think that if you're a Catholic, you say that the Pope is God's representative on earth. And so to you and I can only speak as a Protestant here, but we would say we would tend to agree, I think, with the Brad Hildebrands here. But if you're Catholic, you just view it differently, right?
I guess. But, and here's the difference of me with other things. I essentially say, hey, whatever floats your boat, and that's why I have a severe problem with this anti-Jewish thing, this anti-Semitic thing, which is sweeping the college campuses. And if you've seen like what's going on with Harvard, and it's interesting because the new president of Harvard is a Jew, and he came actually. I read this article about him the other day talking about he was there at Harvard. I think he actually went to school at Harvard, and he talked about how it was a great place, that people were, it was open air, and you could talk about various things. And people would challenge you and have great conversations. Now he says it's just the opposite. That it's like a tremendously negative environment. If you don't say the right things, people are going to chastise you. Blah 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 blah. I guess my thing is, if you saw this, we didn't talk about this the other day, but they gave pink slips to 180 people at Columbia because of the fact that
I saw that
Trump pulled the money from that. Okay, I will say this again. If you are Washington University and you have I don't know how many $billion in their endowment, okay? And Harvard supposedly has like what, $40+ billion in their endowment.
A ton of money, a ton of cash.
If your neighbor, who you knew was a multimillionaire and drove a very nice car and had all the finer things in life, had a private jet out at Spirit that went away on weekends, and one day he came over to you and say, "Hey, John, I can't afford to pay my lawn guy. Can I borrow $50 from you to pay my lawn guy?" And you're going to go, "Dude, you're a multimillionaire. What are you doing asking me for $50? Well, I don't want to go to my bank and take out $50. I'm just going to ask you for $50, and maybe I'll pay you back, maybe I won't." Okay? If you got the billions of dollars in your endowment, I say the federal government should say, here's what we need. We need the soup Nazi to become part of Trump's administration. And what he needs to do is when someone says, Harvard comes in and says, "Sir, can we have $4 billion for research?" And he go, "No money for you." You know
no
what I'm
money
saying?
for you.
No money.
Now, Brad, I hate to quibble with you here. I mean, I love to quibble with you. But if my neighbor came and said, "You need this lawn mowed," I'd pull a Brad Hildebrand and say, as the weather increases, as the temperature rises, you need to keep that grass a little bit longer. You need to stop scalping it. Leave it be at least 4 to 5 inches so that the soil and grass can retain moisture.
John.
But I get your point, though, Brad.
Well,
yeah, you're absolutely right. And just think of, this is one of the things that I think a surprise to the upside of the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, is the aggressiveness of doing stuff like this. And I don't think, we know, I don't have to speculate. We know in Trump's first term, he didn't do stuff like this. And now he says, essentially, soup Nazi, no soup for you.
Right. And it's just like going back a few months, I will remember exactly when I heard the story because I was sitting in the parking lot at the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in, I guess I don't know if that's Kirkwood or Sunset Hills right there, right on the edge. I think it's Sunset Hills. And I was waiting for my wonderful meeting with the folks at KFUO, but that's a whole nother story. And I was listening because I was a little early. I was listening to the interview with Terry Gross, and she had this guy on who wrote this fascinating book. And we talked about one time before about how all these professors at all these universities fake all these research. And the reason they fake it is because of the fact that if they show that they're having positive results with a cure for Alzheimer's or cancer or whatever, the government's going to throw money at them. And he talked about the fact that he could document there were some whiz-bang doctor came out with, or some researcher came out with some very tainted results or something like that. And all of a sudden, everybody used that guy as a reference. Well, Dr. So-and-so says, blah, 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 blah. We agree with him, and we would like to continue his research. And the government says, okay, we'll send you $2 billion. It's gotten out of control. And there was a time, I wish I could remember who the quote was. Somebody in government years ago, million there, million here, million there, pretty soon, it's a lot of money. I don't know about you, John, but to the point where when someone says, "Oh, it's only $20 million, I think, "Oh, that's nothing." You know what I mean? But when somebody says...
Yeah, but we're so desensitized to those numbers.
When somebody says...
If you compare it to your family budget, it's a ton of money. If you compare it and I think, too, that helps big government people because I can't visualize $1 trillion in debt.
Well,
I just think, okay, that's a lot of money.
Not even a trillion, $1 billion. $1 billion is $1,000 million. When you hit that 10th digit, that's $1,000 million. And you think about that for a minute. And you being the financial guy, okay, if you had $10 million and you said, that's going to be my nest egg. I'm going to invest that $10 million and I'm going to have it so it throws off money and that's what I'm going to live on. Okay. If you had $10 million, John, you're Mr. Hedge Eye, Mr. Expert. If you said, I don't want to touch the principal, that's my nest egg. What kind of money could that $10 million throw off per year that you could just live off of?
A ton of, more than enough to live on.
Could you easily do $500,000 a year off of that?
Yeah. Without risking your principal, for sure.
So you could have, and even if you were a millionaire with just $1 million in the bank, and just move the zeros one spot. If you said, okay, I got $1 million in the bank, I'm going to invest it, or I'm going to invest it where it's not going to have any principal degradation, but $1 million is not going to be there. I'm just going to live on the interest. Couldn't you easily have like $50,000 a year thrown off by the $1 million?
Yeah, I mean, if you have kids and you think you can live on 50 grand a year, good luck to you.
Well, but still,
I get what you're saying, Brad. If you have a large chunk of money and you're not risking your principal, can you live off the interest? Yes, that's the answer.
You pay off your house. You pay off your car. You buy a car for cash. You buy a used car. Matter of fact,
you live frugally. You pull a Brad Hildebrand and go to pick and pull. And as Warren Buffett said, Brad, the first rule of investing is don't lose money.
Right. And Warren Buffett's second rule is go to pick and pull, and you'll find the real millionaires who are there on the pick and pull lot. John.
That's exactly what it is.
John, you want me to pick you up someday and take you down to pick and pull?
Absolutely not. No, I don't go east of 270. So let's start there.
See,
and secondly, I have fond memories of going there with my dad as a youth. And I think I'd like to leave it there, Brad. I don't need to go there with another older man. Boy, that sentence sounded gay. I don't need to go there with another older man and start digging through cars.
Did you go there with your dad?
Absolutely. That's how I know about the place. Yeah, Brett, we talked about that in the early days of the show. Yeah, I loved it's right off there off Hall Street. Yeah, I loved going there as a kid with my dad. Because think about it. You're like 7 years old. What's better than like digging through cars and pulling off a windshield wiper?
But it's for me, there's so many levels of that because it's just our incredible throwaway society. You look at what goes on in Cuba, where they don't have any new cars and they keep fixing the old ones, or more appropriately, there's this guy on YouTube, there's so many interesting people on YouTube. All this guy does is he takes pictures of these mechanics working in these third world countries. And he talks about, OSHA violation number 42.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You see these guys welding things, and I don't know if they have shorts on, but some of them are barefoot, and some of them are in sandals, and they're welding and they're grinding, and they have no face protection, no eye protection.
There's no PPE.
Yes, there's no PPE whatsoever. And it's like, okay, that's why when things are manufactured in the United States, okay, this is one of my stupid Brad stories I've never told before, okay? There was a big employer out in St. Clair, Missouri, and I believe the company was called Steel Weld Equipment Company. And what they did, their main contract was their biggest customer was back in the day was Southwestern Bell. They made the truck bodies for the Southwestern Bell service trucks. Okay. They would bring in what they call a cabin chassis, which is, if you buy that from the auto manufacturers, which essentially just is like the cab of a truck and then just the frame rails. And they would build the body of that truck, and they would, they build it from scratch, and they put it on the truck, and they deliver it to Southwestern Bell. Okay? They went out of business. Do you know why they went out of business?
Why is that? Because
of the fact that back in the day, they had the paint shop where they painted all the truck bodies, and it was no big deal. They put it in the paint booth. They had certain, fans and things like that sucked the air out of the paint booth with filters and stuff like that. And the guys would go into paint booths and they would paint the truck bodies, and the truck bodies would then go into a curing thing where they would have infrared, lights in them. They'd bake the enamel, and then they would put them on the trucks and they were done. Okay. I don't know who it was. Someone sent me this document that they had to fill out to essentially maintain their ability to paint trucks. And it was like 100 pages long. They had hired some environmental firm because they were being pushed by the EPA to adhere to all these environmental regulations of painting. And essentially it drove them out of business. Now, the reason I bring that up is, I say that there are rules about OSHA and about EPA. I agree with that. But the problem is, when you go to other countries, there are no rules. And that's how they can make things...
So that's an unfair competition. It's unfair for U.S. companies that must abide by all these regulations to play on an unlevel playing field.
And that's, to a certain extent, what Trump is complaining about. And I'm not a big fan of what he's done with the tariffs. I think he should have been much more selective of that, instead of having that stupid day, Independence Day, where he puts up his chart up and stuff like that. You say, okay... Like, for example, the example that I give all the time. If you are a farmer and you try to export your dairy products into Canada, you face a 262% tariff, okay? That's wrong. So instead of an across-the-board tariff for Canada, you say, okay, Canada, you're nailing our dairy farmers for 262% tariff. We're going to turn around and stick the same thing for you for Canadian whiskey. When you bring Canadian whiskey in the United States, it's 262% tariff. Okay? And then they'll go, well, that's not fair. We'll drop the 262% tariff on dairy products, and we'll drop the 262% tariff on Canadian whiskey. Okay, deal. And you walk away from the table.
Yeah, that seems pretty fair. And people should be buying their whiskey from one of David Hoffman's bourbon sites right there in Washington, Missouri. He's got it, one in Washmo and one in Augusta. You probably haven't seen him, Brad, but
he's got bourbon places?
Yeah, I just made that up.
Oh.
Also, I think we could all support a high tariff on pink safety vests.
John.
What they're missing in third world countries, they don't need shoes when they're welding. They just need pink safety vests so people can spot them at ribbon cuttings.
John, you know what? There are people in my life who I hold dear, and you are one of them because of the fact that you give me tremendous amounts of CRAP. I'm not going to diminish my radio
Brad,
station.
Language spicy. I like it.
KRAP. I have a couple other people in my life like that, and there are times when I walk away after having a conversation with them, very frustrated, but yet I think to myself, you know what? I'm glad that person is in my life because they really do challenge me. And I learned my lesson back in 1994. Brad has to stay constantly challenged, otherwise he gets bored.
Yeah, I believe that. And, we know how you feel about retirement.
Yes.
I just can't wait until, we're leaving the funeral home and the kids have finally dumped off your radio licenses to me. And I pull a Columbo and I say, one more thing before I go. You have that pink safety vest?
Okay, John, say goodbye.
See you tomorrow.